Joining the group chat now, Michael Crowley, diplomatic correspondent at the New York Times. Michael, this reporting from your colleagues at the Times, what can you tell us about it?
Well, this is of a piece with what Pete Hegseth has been doing for months, which is pushing out a large number of senior career military officials who don't meet his requirements for one reason or another. In a lot of cases, he's pushing out people who he deems to have been promoted as a result of DEI policies, although these are, frequently very highly qualified people who clearly advance through merit. It's dramatic in all kinds of ways. I mean, one is that obviously Pete Hegseth is someone who has had very little managerial experience. You'll recall that during his confirmation hearing, there were personal issues about his personal conduct, but really, I think some of the most damning questions were about his qualifications to manage an organization quite this large. And although he does have an honorable military record, he's not served in the senior ranks. So it's very troubling to many veteran military folks and analysts to see someone like that come in and start pushing out so many people so quickly. And, there's a particular drama to it at a moment where we're sort of stalemated in this conflict with Iran. And, although our military is an excellent fighting force, the best in the world, it has not been able to, as Hegseth has said it has, been able to completely disable Iran's fighting capability. And, the fact that we went into a war without a clear plan to maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz does suggest that there were some strategic failings on the part of the military. So it raises a lot of questions and concerns at a very difficult moment for the U.S. For American foreign policy and the military.
How frustrating is that for members of the military? The president has neither explained to the American people nor our forces why we got into this conflict to begin with. And on a daily basis, they are misrepresenting the actual status quo.
Well, the president, of course, has offered, and his advisors like Marco Rubio have offered a variety of explanations, and they kind of shift depending on the moment, depending on who's speaking. I mean, there is this consistent theme that it was to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, although there was not evidence that Iran was making a dramatic move to restart its nuclear program at the start of the conflict. So, I think that the combination of mixed messages and this question about, why that moment was necessary to start a conflict over Iran's nuclear program, particularly when negotiations were really in a pretty early stage. And, a lot of people think that there was potential for diplomacy there. I think that's a source of a lot of confusion. And, something that I have written about that I still think we need a more thorough look at is how there was not a clearer plan to maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz. This was something that many presidents going back decades realized would be a huge problem in any conflict with Iran. And it just doesn't seem like there was a plan. The military has not been able to keep the strait open to free shipping. So what happened there? And I think that's a frustration that we walked into this conflict without a clear plan for the most obvious Iranian response.
Molly, what's your reaction to all this?
Look, Donald Trump promised no more foreign wars. He had military adventuring with 7 countries. I think that, there was a sense he put Hegseth in there. I mean, he said because
he looked the part.
Camera ready. And that, he has to run this huge organization. This is more than 2.8 million people. And his experience is weekend television hosting, which is very hard, but not in the same way.
I sense sarcasm in your voice. Well, this is a critical time, right, for the Department of Defense. They're struggling to adapt to new kinds of warfare, keep up with the weapons demands, and now this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this would have been a difficult time for this Defense Department, even if there weren't this war in Iran, right? Like, there are a lot of ways in which the world is changing, the advent of AI, drone warfare, as we're seeing in Ukraine. Like, there are all these ways in which the nature of combat is changing. And we happen to be having that occur at the same time that we have a Fox and Friends host running the Department of Defense with a former reality television president. I do think it's worth stepping back, though, and just remembering that in 2025, in the summer, we were promised that Iran's nuclear capabilities were obliterated beyond repair, right? Like, there was this bombing, and that was supposed to have taken care of it. And then we went to Venezuela, and they got Maduro, and then all of a sudden everything was great. And then they decided they were going to try the same thing in Iran. And it's very obvious what happened, right? So all of us know what happened, which is that they got chuffed up and they thought they were hot and they were going to come in and they were going to take out Iran. And everyone was talking in their ear about how easy it would be. And then it wasn't. And so now they're just left and have been left for the past 6 months or however long it's been, scrambling to come up with oh no, this was the plan all along. And so we have to try and obliterate their nuclear capability is now the plan that they have settled on because it works with the base. But this was already dealt with in 2025. It's insane. And I think it's okay for us to say this is insane.
Allie, my Wall Street sources who in the early days of the war thought this was a good idea. And these are the same people who are emphatic that we cut spending, that we have entitlement reform. When I try to bring up the war to any of them, they are looking out the window, calling somebody. It's like a third rail. They just don't want to touch it. Who are the lawmakers? What are the lawmakers' names who are all in on this war in Iran? This thing's great.
I actually think two things can be true at once, right? The first is that Iran is an adversarial threat on the world stage. The second is that politically, this is awful. And the way in which the administration has done it, not selling it to the American public, no clearly defined goals, no clear way out.
Nobody's defending Iran. Nobody's saying these are good guys. Don't go after them.
Of course not. Of course not. Yes. Absolutely not. This is actually something that I asked Ted Cruz. Okay, you didn't like the memorandum of understanding, which ended it, would have seen Iran have unfrozen assets, among other things. No real answers on the nuclear question, which was originally a goal, and then the goal became the Strait of Hormuz, which wasn't a problem really until this war began. Putting that aside, his actual best estimate of what should happen next is, start arming protesters on the ground. No boots on the ground, but start arming protesters on the ground.
How much is that going to cost us?
That's an open question, right? There's that as an idea. Rick Scott recently said that the president needs to go back to more kinetic military actions. Okay, that goes back to the question of the missile stockpile, right?
How much is that going to cost us?
Who are in for a penny, in for a pound on this one.
Right.
And I think that because the rhetoric for Republicans for years has been that we have to militarily in some way cut off Iran, stop the nuclear stockpile, all of which has a national security cell, it's a very hard problem to solve. And the administration made it sound like we're in and out in 4 weeks. It's a skirmish. It's whatever else we want to call it. It's not that. And so there are Republicans who are pushing for it because they feel, Mike Pence among them, that you got to finish the job once you start it. But it is not an easy job to finish. And that's where the administration just completely miscalculated.
And it's a massively expensive one. As our deficit balloons. Michael Crowley, thank you for joining us this morning. The rest of you not leaving just yet.